Tah Yahuwah Aleinu Melech Haolam. Yahuwah, we thank you for this day, your Shabbat, a sign and a covenant between you and Yisrael from generation to generation. Help us to guard and keep your Shabbat as you have required, Yahuwah. Let there be shalom in this house, among this family. Provide for all our needs, Yahuwah, for you alone are Yahuwah Yarah. And provide for all the assemblies that are gathered together this day to honor you, to set themselves apart, and to practice all your good deeds. Yahuwah, be with us. We ask for your Ruach HaKodesh to lead us into all truth. Be with us, teach us, Yahuwah, and allow us to receive your truth, to change our minds, that we may be renewed in our thinking, Yahuwah, that our walk would be pleasing in your sight. Give us rest this day, Yahuwah. Restore our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. To the Rabbah, thank you for this family. Thank you for this fellowship. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your Shabbat. We give you all honor and praise. B'Shem Yehusha HaMashiach. Hallelujah.
Amen. Amen. All right. So, here, you sit on over here and I'll get all this set up. All right. Yeah, we can just leave that there. Should be all right. And take this down. And sort it up. Right. And you set to go.
All right. So today I wanted to share a bit on the Torah of foreign believers.
I'm waiting for all y'all to get done so I can get whatever.
What is the concept of a foreigner, of a stranger, of a neighbor in relationship to a Hebrew, an Hebrew, or an Israelite? How should we deal with foreigners or outsiders? What does it mean? We have all these questions because most of us have been raised in this Greco-Roman society that has been shaped and influenced by the Roman Catholic Church. So we understand the history of the Roman Catholic Church and how it was founded by Emperor Constantine. Emperor Constantine was Emperor of Rome, and he wanted to create a state religion to cover his entire empire so that all the provinces that were under the rule of the Roman Empire would have one religion, and all the different peoples of various ethnicities would become one people. So you have he created what is called the Catholic Church. Now, church is what we have now in English from the word in Greek ekklesia, which means called out or congregation or assembly. And Catholic, this just means universal. So Catholic Church means the universal congregation. And that was the desire of Emperor Constantine, to make a universal religion, to make all the different peoples of various nations that were under the control of the Roman Empire one people. So this is what the understanding that we have today when we come out of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, or whatever other religion. It teaches that all people are one people. Christianity teaches all Christians are one. You leave behind your nationality, you leave behind your ethnicity, and you become one people. Well, that's not what the Torah teaches that's not what the Mashiach taught. Okay. As far as, you know, in the Christian church, you know, all members, you know, you say, you know, this is a brother, this is a sister, basically meaning this is a person that's a member of the church. But when you read in the Tanakh in the New Testament, when they're talking about brothers and sisters, they're not talking about people that are sharing the same religion. They're talking about people of the same nation. So when they're talking, when Paul and Peter are talking, saying, you know, brothers, those brothers are fellow Israelites. They're not talking to foreigners. But what most of us have been raised with is the doctrine that the Old Testament was for the Jews, and, you know, JC came along and died so that, you know, Gentiles, meaning foreigners, could be saved. But when you have an understanding of what actually Yahuwah set up from the beginning, you know that doesn't make any sense. So we're going to look at that. You know, what was the Torah or the instruction given to Israel on how to deal with foreigners? And again, being an Hebrew or a Hebrew, being an Israelite is not a religion. Okay? So you don't become an Israelite by converting to Torah or converting to this way of walk. You don't become an Israelite. You're an Israelite by birth, by bloodline. An Israelite is a descendant of Yaakov, Israel. Okay, so this whole idea, you know, even today we have some congregations that talk about becoming an Israelite. Even they have foreigners calling themselves Israelites. It doesn't really follow the teachings of what's found in the Tanakh. And you also have this teaching mostly propagated by these Messianic Jews about adoption. You know, you're adopted, foreigners are adopted into the nation of Israel, all that kind of, you know, baloney. But we're going to get to the root of this issue. We're going to go back to what the Torah actually stated and what Yahuwah intended from the beginning. So we're going to go back to the book of Shemot or Exodus, chapter 12. I'm going to start in verse 49. So Exodus chapter 12, 49. Okay. So we understand that when our ancestors, when Israel was led out of Egypt, that Israel came out as a mixed multitude. They came out as a mixed multitude, meaning that Israelites came out and also foreigners as well came out with Israel. So when this happened, we see in Exodus chapter 12, we'll start reading in verse 49, it says, "One law shall be to him that is homeborn and unto the stranger that sojourns among you." So Yahuwah made it very clear from the beginning that there's one Torah, both for the native, meaning the Israelite, and also for the stranger or the foreigner that sojourns or travels with us, who lives among us. Okay, so that's pretty clear. And we're going to go and see what other witnesses we have in the Torah. So we're going to go to Devarim, Bamidbar, or Numbers, chapter 15. We'll go to verse 15. Okay. So it says, one ordinance shall be both for you of the congregation and also for the stranger that sojourns with you. An ordinance forever in your generations, as you are, so shall the stranger be before Yahuwah. So Yahuwah is making it clear that there is one law, both for the native born and for the foreigner. And if you notice, it says, the ordinance shall be both for you of the congregation. So we understand that the congregation means the nation of Israel. So, as I said, in the New Testament, congregation is translated as church. So wherever you see church in the New Testament, that means the nation of Israel. And that's how the apostles understood it. Now, in 2017, after all the corruptions and interpretations of foreigners and of the Catholic Church, church now means, a religious building or basically a religious organization. But to the authors of the Tanakh and of the New Testament, church meant the congregation, meaning the nation of Israel. Because the nation of Israel was the one that was called out of Egypt. And again, the Greek word ekklesia, which is translated as church, means called out. And Israel was called out of Egypt. Okay, going on to the next verse, 16. One law and one manner shall be for you and for the stranger that sojourns with you. So if any foreigner wants to join himself or herself to the nation of Israel, that person must follow the same Torah. Now again,
hey Adonai, real quick, when you say join, is that pretty much straight up what it means, or is there any?
For example, to live among us.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, in other words, like I was saying before, a foreigner does not become an Israelite. It's not like becoming a Christian or becoming a Muslim. An Israelite is an ethnicity, it's a nationality.
Okay.
So, for example, an Ishmaelite that wants to, follow Torah and live among Israel would still be an Ishmaelite, but they'd be a Torah observant Ishmaelite. And same with any other, ethnicity. An Egyptian, and there were Egyptians that left Egypt and came out with the Israelites. An Egyptian would still be an Egyptian, but they, living among Israel, they would be following the Torah. So a conversion or following the Torah does not change your nationality. Okay, verse 17. Let's see. So again, there's one Torah. So we're going to jump down to verse 29. You shall have one law for him that sins through ignorance, both for him that is born among the children of Israel, and for the stranger that sojourns among them. Okay, again, to make it even more clear that the congregation is the nation of Israel, it says, for him that is born among the children of Israel, and for the stranger that sojourns among them. All right, so there's one Torah, there's one law. Okay? And it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is treated the same, Just like the Levites had certain duties that other tribes didn't have. You know, there's certain things that foreigners couldn't do that Israelites could do. Okay, but in general, there's one Torah for anyone who wants to follow Yahuwah. In other words, anyone who wants to serve Yahuwah, there's only one way to do it, and He's given the guideline of how to serve Him. All right, so we're gonna stay in Numbers, and we're gonna jump back to chapter 9. And go to verse 14. And all of this is leading up to a point, like I said, that, you know, in Christianity, you know, we were basically taught the doctrine that JC died to let in the Gentiles who we were taught were the foreigners, so that, you know, everyone is one big happy family now. But that's not actually what it teaches. So we're going to get to the point in Acts where it talks about Cornelius, because there's the confusion about Cornelius. Was he a foreigner or was he an Israelite? All right. So we have to go back. We're going back through all this Torah to get the basis before we can get to Cornelius. Okay, so Numbers chapter 9, verse 14. And if a stranger shall sojourn among you, and will keep the Passover unto Yahuwah, according to the ordinance of the Passover, and according to the manner thereof, so shall he do. He shall have one ordinance both for the stranger and for him that was born in the land. Okay? So again, mentioning, if there is whether it's an Israelite or a foreigner, if you want to serve Yahuwah, there's one way of doing it. And He's given the ordinance of how to do it. Now we're going to go to Deuteronomy, or Devarim, chapter 1. Are there any questions on the chat? Okay. All right, so we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 1 and go down to verse 16. And I charge your judges at that time, saying, hear the causes between your brethren, and judge righteously between every man and his brother and the stranger that is with him. So again, this goes back to what I was mentioning before, that a brother is a fellow Israelite. When they say brother, it's a fellow Israelite. Okay? So hear the causes between your brethren and judge righteously between every man and his brother. So that's between a man and his fellow Israelite. And then it says, and the stranger that is with him. So a stranger is not a brother. You see? So when you get in, you have to understand this language, you have to understand this new this terminology. So when you get into the New Testament, you understand what they're actually talking about. So when James, Peter, and John are talking about brothers, they're not talking to foreigners. They're talking to fellow Israelites.
And you can't say that the stranger is like a northern tribe or something. Like, you know what I'm saying? They're not split or whatever.
Right.
Because they're brothers.
Right. So,
So when Yahuwah is referring to the stranger, okay, he's saying that the stranger he's converted over to Torah.
right.
Okay, not just a stranger who's not converted.
Right.
So he's using it in a context of someone who's at peace
Right.
with Israel.
Right. Yes. We're not talking about just. We're not talking about foreigners in general. We're talking about foreigners that are following Torah. Okay. You know, even when you get into the New Testament and you look how the Mashiach dealt with foreigners, there was a certain way he dealt with foreigners, and he only dealt with he dealt with foreigners that submitted and followed the ways of Israel a certain way. Okay. So yeah, so we're not talking about foreigners in general. We're talking about foreigners that have submitted to the rule of Israel and have submitted to the Torah.
That's the difference between the foreigner and the stranger. Okay.
Okay. So now we're going to go to Wa'ikra or Leviticus, chapter 22, okay, and verse 18. And again, if we bring it to the present day, we have many foreigners that are coming into this Messianic Judaism kind of movement. They call it Hebrew Roots movement. However, they do not submit to Israel as being the authority. They still keep their biases. They still keep their racism. All right, so that
they don't recognize us as the people of the book.
Right. So that would be a case of a foreigner trying to get into the kingdom, but they're not. That would not be acceptable to Yahuwah.
Yeah, that's why I was saying. So like, when the foreigners try to get in, if they got their own church and trying to teach it, they can't do it that way.
No. Yahuwah has only ordained Israel to teach his Torah. Only Israel to teach his Torah. That's why he called us to be a nation of kings and priests. And the role of a priest is to, to teach the Torah, to be the mediator between Yahuwah and the people. So we're supposed to be a nation of priests. And you go throughout the whole Tanakh and into the New Testament, we were the ones that were supposed to teach all the nations the ways of Yahuwah. Okay. And he didn't ordain any other nation to do that. So if a foreigner proclaims themselves to be a teacher or a prophet or whatever, it's not acceptable. Okay.
And then just on top of that, it's like these people couldn't, these other nations, they think about themselves so much they can't even see us in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you do have a few that will submit to us, and those are the few that will make it into the kingdom. Mm-hmm. But as far as generally speaking, they have all these doctrines like being grafted in and all this doctrine of adoption, where they're reading a lot into something that is not there. It's not there.
And you're gonna clear it up too, real simple.
Okay, so again, what I'm doing is I'm showing you the Torah. From the beginning, Yahuwah accepted foreigners that submitted to him. So this flies in the face of the doctrine that's taught in the Christian church that JC died so that foreigners could come in. Because there was never, they tried to use that verse from Paul saying, Christ has broken down the middle wall between the Jew and the Gentile. He's saying that the Gentile is referring to foreigners. Well, you see from the very beginning, there was no wall of partition. So there was nothing, preventing foreigners from following Yahuwah. All they had to do was submit. Okay, so Leviticus chapter 22, verse 18. Speaking unto Aharon and his sons, and unto all the children of Yisrael, and say unto them, whatsoever he be of the house of Israel, or of the stranger in Israel, that will offer his oblation to all his vows, and for all his freewill offerings, which they will offer unto the Yahuwah for a burnt offering. So again, talking about a stranger in Israel, or a foreigner in Israel, being able to offer sacrifices to Yahuwah. Okay. Now we have to understand how they did that. Is the foreigners weren't allowed into the temple area. There was a certain boundary that said, and you can look this up. They've actually found this archaeological. They've actually found these artifacts that there was a signpost in the temple that said, "No foreigners beyond this point on pain of death." So there was a certain boundary in the temple that foreigners weren't allowed to cross. So that, again, talking about that we followed the same Torah, but there are certain things that were only for Israel, and and so on and so forth. Okay, so we understand that as the basic understanding in Torah, that Yahuwah, from the beginning, when he gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, he gave room for the foreigner who submitted to Israel and submitted to his Torah. He gave them space to dwell among Israelites. Not to become an Israelite, but to dwell among us. So now we're going to go to the prayer of Solomon that he prayed at the dedication of the temple. So we're going to go to 1 Kings chapter 8. All right, we're going to go down to verse 41. Oops. Let's go back here. All right, 1 Kings chapter 8. All right, 41. All right, so this is King Solomon praying at the dedication of the temple. Moreover, concerning a stranger that is not your people Israel, but comes out of a far country for your name's sake. So he goes through this whole prayer. Now he's speaking about a foreigner that comes, who is not, he's making it clear that this foreigner is not an Israelite. But this foreigner is coming to the temple because the foreigner has heard that Yahuwah is a great Elohim. Okay? For they shall hear of your great name and of your strong hand and of your stretched out arm when he shall come and pray toward this house. Alright, so this house meaning the temple. Hear you in heaven, your dwelling place, and do according to all that the stranger calls to you for, that all people of the earth may know your name, to fear you as do your people Israel, and that they may know that this house which I have built is called by your name. So this is the prayer of King Solomon at the dedication, saying that if a foreigner comes and prays towards your temple, fulfill the prayer of the stranger, so that the strangers will know that you are the true and mighty Elohim, and so that your name will be feared all over the world. And that was the purpose of Israel from the beginning, was to do what? Spread the Torah to all nations. So this whole idea that foreigners cannot come to Yahuwah, it was never there. when Yahuwah spoke to Moses, it's not here when King Solomon is speaking, praying to Yahuwah at the dedication of the temple. So when you get into the New Testament, where does this whole doctrine come that there's a separation or a wall of partition between Israelites and foreigners? Because we don't see it here.
So just so everybody understands, because that's the heavy part. There's nowhere in the Bible where it does not say foreigners cannot come in and join themselves to here. So, and that's the whole, right there, that kills everything. A matter of fact, he's showing everywhere where it says there's any other nation can join themselves to our nation. It's all through the Bible. So right there, that, like, you go tell Vocab Malone or somebody that, and you just took all the wind out of their sails.
So, like you say, Jesus Christ didn't have to come die for the foreigners to become part of it.
Exactly. Even better, yeah. That's an even better way of saying it. Yep.
Yeah. So, this whole doctrine that JC had to come and die for foreigners to come in, you make that null and void, because there was nothing preventing them from being able to come in from the first place.
Anywhere in there where they were, yeah. Exactly.
So there must be another reason why the Mashiach came to die.
Ooh.
Okay. But he didn't come to die for the foreigner. All right. So now we're going to look at, how Israel was to treat foreigners that lived among them. Okay. Again, this is talking about foreigners that keep the Torah. This is not how to treat heathen that worship other gods. This is about how to treat foreigners that follow the Torah, that are foreigners that are circumcised, in other words. Okay, so we're going to go to back to Exodus. Chapter 22. I'm read verse.
And see what a lot of these Hebrew camps try to do is they try to say, oh, well, foreigner there meant strangers, meant
Northern Kingdom.
Yeah.
Northern Kingdom and split kingdom, so they really called them foreigners, strangers, and all that.
Okay. So this is Exodus 22:21. You shall neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Ain't no way around that.
Okay, so this is very clear on how Israelites were supposed to treat foreigners that follow the Torah. Not foreigners in general, but foreigners that follow the Torah. I want to make that clear. Okay? And again, this does not include these so-called Hebrew roots foreigners that they claim that they're going back to Hebrew roots and following the Torah, but they do not recognize us as Israel. Okay, they're not included, because when we look at the example of Mashiach, for example, the Syrian woman that was begging for her daughter to be healed, she had to submit and admit that she was a dog before she could receive her blessing. She had to submit and admit that Israel were the children and that she was the dog before she could receive her blessing. Okay? And a lot of these Hebrew roots and these Messianic Jewish people, they can't they can't do that.
Yeah, they try to say she was an Israelite. That's what they try to say. They're like, no, she wasn't. She was in Samaria, but she was Israelite. That's what they're trying to say too.
And that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I know.
In context, it doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, there was another episode of the Roman centurion that had a a Hebrew servant that was sick, and he was going to Mashiach for the healing of his Hebrew servant. And the people, the Yahudim, vouched for this Roman centurion, said, "This man he's a godly man. He treats us well." So the people were actually vouching for this man, saying that, he's not just the regular Roman soldier that just treats us like trash. He actually treats us well, and he actually follows the Torah. So, again, so I want to qualify all these things, that this is not talking about how to treat foreigners in general, but how to treat foreigners that keep the Torah the way it's supposed to be kept.
And just to add to that point, because we're not supposed to have anything to do with these other nations that are willfully doing their thing, serving whoever the heck they messing with. But the ones who want to come to us and be like us, hey, we accept them in.
Right.
But as far as trying to be the Asian man or who's worshiping Buddha, trying to be his buddy, and Kemetic dude, we ain't messing with him.
Right. Okay. So we're going to stay in Exodus. We're going to jump to chapter 23.
But I have a question though.
Okay.
There's a scripture. What about that scripture where it says he shall be like a whatever and receive an inheritance?
Okay, yeah. There's a lot of people that use that one about the eunuch and the dry tree and all that kind of stuff. That he shall receive a name better than children.
No. It said the stranger, if he lives with you, he should be as an Israelite, and he shall receive an inheritance just like an Israelite.
Okay,
yeah.
we'll get to that.
Okay.
I think I know the passage you're talking about. So just remind me.
All right.
Okay. All right. All right, so we're going to go to verse 9. That's 23, verse 9. And you shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the heart of a stranger, seeing you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So again, look at us now in another Egypt. And we know what it's like to be discriminated against. We know what it's like to be oppressed. And then we have some brothers that are teaching, we're going to oppress, foreign believers just the way that we oppressed us. Well, we see clearly from the beginning that the attitude of Yahuwah saying, you know what it's like to be oppressed. So if a foreigner who's believing is among you, don't oppress him like the way that you didn't want.
It's going to be a righteous servitude.
Right.
In the kingdom. Yeah.
Right.
But they teach that even like you say, they the foreigner and they want to come and teach like us, that they can't. They still, we still going to oppress them even if they, want to submit and, follow Torah, that we know you can't. We're going to be a slave, you know what I'm saying?
And that's another tenet of the Catholic Church, being Catholic meaning universal, that as egalitarian, everyone's the same. All right, that's not what you find in Torah. Yahuwah makes clear the levels and roles of authority, whether it's national, whether it's in the family. So it's not like foreigners have an equal role or equal authority to an Israelite. No, that's not what it's saying here. Alright, so we're going to go same vein of thought, going over to Deuteronomy chapter 10. I'm going to read verse 18. And really, all this is plain right here in anyone's Bible, whatever translation you have. There's so many verses that teach this, yet you still have this weird doctrine in the Christian church that JC died for foreigners. You know, because people don't read. Or they don't read for themselves.
Do you think it's still partly because most of them still believe they Gentiles, so if he didn't die for, you know, the foreigners, he didn't die for the Gentiles. You know what I'm saying? He didn't die for us. So it's like you say, they really push that and they just like ignore the scriptures.
Right.
Because they don't know that they, you know, most black churches don't know they not Gentiles.
Right. All right, so Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 18. He does execute the judgment of the fatherless and widow and loves the stranger in giving him food and raiment. All right, so again, let me go up one so we can get more of the context of who's doing what. Okay, so verse 17. For Yahuwah your Elohim is Elohim of Elohim, and Lord of Lords, a great Elohim, a mighty and a terrible, which regards not persons nor takes reward. He does execute the judgment of the fatherless and widow, and loves the stranger in giving him food and raiment. Love you therefore the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Okay, so it's talking about Yahuwah. Says he loves the stranger. And then what's the commandment? Is this a suggestion or is it a commandment? It's a commandment. It says, love you therefore the stranger.
And stranger there is the people from another nation who have joined themselves.
Right. A foreigner who obeys the Torah. Okay. Because we see plenty of instances where, you know, whoever, whether it's Gideon, whether it's David, you know, fighting against the Canaanites and the Philistines, all right, those were foreigners, and we didn't love them, okay, because, you know, obviously they weren't, you know, following the Torah. So let's put all that in context. Okay, and we're going to go over to Psalm 146. Okay, 146 verse 9. Okay. Yahuwah preserves the stranger. He relieves the fatherless and the widow, but the way of the wicked he turns upside down. Okay, so again, this goes right with what we just read in Deuteronomy, right? And why these three are put together? You have the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. Why this combination of these three? We saw the same combination in Deuteronomy chapter 10. What's the correlation between the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow? Anyone?
The correlation between the stranger, the father, and
the fatherless and the widow.
The widow.
They don't have no heads, like, you know, widow.
I don't know.
Right. These were the people in society that were disenfranchised. All right, the fatherless didn't have a parent to provide for them. The widow didn't have a husband to provide for her, and also the stranger, he was separated from his people. Okay, right. So, in other words, these were the people that would be on the lower levels of society. You know, these would be the people that you would give alms to. You right? But what does it say in the list of blessings and curses? In the list of curses says, if you don't obey me, what will happen to the stranger that lives among you? He will rise higher and higher. All right? But just like, look at the convenience store in all the black neighborhoods.
Korean hair store.
All right, they raise higher and higher. All right? But if if we were doing what we're supposed to be doing, these people would be, these foreigners that are in our communities would be disenfranchised. They would be the ones that we would be having to give alms to. But because we're being cursed, these are the ones that are reigning over us. All right.
Weren't we just watching a documentary on the hair industry itself?
Yeah.
Where even they know they have it locked down so good, they don't have to let you in. They won't let you in, and they're not going to go to jail for it.
Right.
No litigation, nothing.
Well, yeah, they won't let you in.
They won't let you buy anything wholesale to redistribute it to your community.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Yeah. These foreigners that, because of these curses, and because Yahuwah, his word is true, they have risen to a place of prominence in our communities and have become rich off of us.
Yeah.
Instead of being the beggars, and they're the wealthy.
Like, what's the show? Deion Sanders, his daughter's trying to do it. She ain't nothing. And he got the money to back him to get in the hair industry. And boy, they give her such a hard time trying to get in there. Like you say, they really lock the industry down. And she got the funds and all that, but it's like they just close it off.
And then even if she do get in, the supplier's gonna overcharge her where she ain't.
That's what's happening. That's what's happening. Exactly. So, like she good too, but it's
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, and they do it so they even I saw in one documentary that the catalogs are all in foreign languages.
Yeah.
So you can't even order stuff.
Yeah, you can't.
That's what we were watching. And what is the government? Our government sets all those nations up to come in and make money off us.
Yes.
And it's like, if you ever try to get a SABC loan, a Small Business Association loan, it's impossible, man. You can't get a loan. They want all this stuff. They want you gotta have like $30,000 cash sitting in the bank. I ain't got that.
Okay. So now we're going to look at some examples of foreigners actually converting to following Yahuwah. And we're going to see that all this happened in the so-called Old Testament. So if foreigners could convert to following Yahuwah in the Old Testament, why did GAC need to die for foreigners? Obviously, the Mashiach didn't die for foreigners. He died for another reason. He died and resurrected for another reason. Okay, so we're going to go to 2 Kings. And we're going to look at the case of Naaman. 2 Kings chapter 5. So Naaman was a mighty captain of a foreign nation, of a foreign army. So we'll read in verse 1. Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master, and honorable because by him Yahuwah had given deliverance into Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. Okay, so this is Naaman. He's a captain of an army, of the Syrian army. He's a great and mighty man, but he's suffering from leprosy. So we'll touch a little bit on this word that's translated as leper or leprosy in the Bible. Okay, it's not the disease that we look at today with, person's body parts falling off and all kinds of stuff. When you just use the eSword or get a concordance and look up leper and leprosy and look at all the instances where it's used. In all the instances that it's used, the only symptom of leprosy is that the skin turns white as snow. That's the only symptom. It's not boils, it's not sores, it's not anything else. It's only the only thing that it mentions is that the skin turns white. Okay, so we got that out of the way. So basically it's like vitiligo. Alright, so So Naaman, this foreigner, this captain of the Syrian army, he has the skin condition. So he's going to find out that he's going to go to Israel to find the prophet or the man of Elohim to get his healing. It's a pretty well-known story. You know, if not, you can go back and read it. It's here in 2 Kings chapter 5. Okay. We're going to jump down to verse 17. And Naaman said, "Shall there not then, I pray thee, be given to thy servant?" So this is after, you know, Naaman has gone to the prophet and he's received his healing. You know, his skin has been restored, and he wants to give the prophet a reward. And the prophet's saying, "No, I don't want a reward from you." All right. So Naaman said, Shall there not then, I pray thee, be given to your servant 2 mules burden of earth? So Naaman is asking that, he's asking for the soil of the land of Israel to take back with him. "For your servant will henceforth offer neither burnt offering nor sacrifice unto other gods, but unto Yahuwah." So this foreigner, this Syrian, has converted to worshiping Yahuwah. So he's going to take back these, you know, whatever sacks of earth from the land of Israel, because the people connected the Elohim of the land to the soil. So that's why he wanted to take back the soil of Israel. So when he goes back to his homeland, he will have that soil and he will worship Yahuwah. Okay. And verse 18. "In this thing Yahuwah pardon your servant." Again, he's talking to the prophet, and he's calling himself his servant. So he's putting the Israelite above him. Mm-hmm. You understand? So this is Naaman himself talking. "In this thing Yahuwah pardon your servant, that when my master goes in the house of Rimmon to worship there," so his master is the king. Remember, he's the captain of the Roman army under the king of Syria. So the king of Syria worships a foreign god, Rimmon. So he's asking, he's saying, "I will serve Yahuwah. Just excuse me on this one point, that when my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, when I bow down myself in the house of Rimmon, Yahuwah pardon your servant in this thing." So he's saying that when I escort the king into the house of this foreign god, and the king bows down to this god, he has to bow down with the king. So he's asking that Yahuwah just forgive him for that. But in all other things, he's going to serve Yahuwah. And you see that there's nowhere here that, you know, the prophet says, "No, you can't do that. You know, you have to wait for JC to come and die for you." Yeah. You don't see that here.
And that's the Old Testament.
All right.
But just remember how you said they try to like mess with the leper part. And like in this one, they had like a little commentary, and it says like the scholars have long felt that the Hebrew word for Naaman's illness, leper, refers to more conditions than just Hansen's disease. So they try to make it like it's not just about, you know, the skin changing and other stuff.
Yeah, Hansen's disease is that, you know, the body parts falling off and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that they call leprosy today. All right, but yeah, but
then I mean, it pretty much. How could he have that disease where his body parts are falling off and he in the military and a man of valor, they said, right?
Yeah.
And must try to punch somebody, his arm go flying up.
But like you said, they say it's boys, because they can say, oh, so like when we, like, you know, when they say, you know, Moses, you know, how he changed red and white and Moses, so they could just say, oh no, leprosy then was like just bumps or something, and he just made the bumps disappear. That's what they try to say. Trying to, you know, just to describe the skin part.
Okay. So you see the reply of the prophet in verse 19. "And he said unto him, Go in peace." Go in
Go
peace.
in peace. Yeah,
Oh, no, you have to wait, 1,000 years for JC to come and die for you. You can't come right now.
Wow.
Is it go in
Like you
peace?
said, that's in the New Testament. Like, what? It's just like,
Okay.
I mean, the Old Testament, they don't see that.
All right. So again, there was nothing preventing a foreigner from serving or converting to serving Yahuwah. He had to submit and recognize that Israel was the authority, and you see that in his language. He's calling the prophet. He's calling himself the servant of the prophet. He's saying, "Forgive your servant," and again, he's committing himself to serving Yahuwah.
Now, what about when interracial dating? If it's a stranger,
Mm-hmm.
how is that? Is that something that's sanctioned on the Torah? Is there provision for that?
So the question is about interracial relationships. There's a lot to that, but basically, and that would have to be another lesson. But basically, the understanding would be, here in America we have, they have what they call the one-drop rule. That if you have one drop of Negro blood, you're Negro. Well, in Israel, and actually according to the Torah, it's opposite. Because it says that, and I have to look this up, but there's a passage in the prophets that says that Yahuwah has desired a pure seed. Okay, so because you have some people, teachers in Israel teaching that you are what your father is, which is technically correct, but not in Israel. It's not so correct.
Okay.
For a foreigner, it's correct.
Okay.
If a Edomite has a child with another nation, the child is an Edomite. All right. For an Israelite, if an Israelite mixes with another nation, the child is not considered. If the father is an Israelite, the child is not really considered an Israelite. It's considered mixed.
Okay.
Okay. Until the third generation. All right.
So that's what that come in with the Ruth thing, saying,
Yeah. So, but when you see the pattern of our fathers, like when you look at the pattern of Abraham with Isaac, Abraham gave his servant Eliezer. He told him, "Go to this specific family and get my son a wife from this family."
Okay.
Okay. And again, when you look at Jacob, he went to his relatives, whereas Esau, he went to
some other land.
Canaanites, and Isaac was not happy with his wives.
Okay.
Okay.
Because they had been in a different culture, they served a different God.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, when you get into the book of Tobit,
and one of them was seven. It was like seven lands. He said, "Don't get a wife from." Like Canaan.
yeah,
There's
there's
like
chapters, yeah.
Different contexts.
You say Samson?
Well, that he was talking about the list of nations that we're not even supposed to mix with at all.
Right.
But you also have, you read in the book of Tobit, which is an apocrypha, where he sends his son to get. He says, "Don't get a wife from any other nation. Go." He had to travel to this place. He had to go far away just to get a wife from Israel that was an Israelite. And again, we see what happened with Samson that you had just mentioned, that he was longing, and we saw what happened with Solomon, lusting after women of other nations. So we would have to get more into that. That's a whole nother lesson. Okay, and again, when you look at the books of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah, the remnant of Judah was coming back into the land, and there were some men of Judah that had married Babylonian women and had children by them, and they told them, send away your wives and their children. So that whole "you are what your father is" doctrine that didn't hold for them, because they said, send away your wives and their children. Okay. So, I mean, I'll leave it at that. But in other words, it's not really cut and dry. There's lots of history in there. But basically, it's discouraged. I would say that. I'm not going to say that you're breaking the Torah, but it is highly discouraged to mix with other nations. Okay, so we had the case of Naaman. Okay. All right, so we're going to look at what happened in the book of Esther, talking about interracial relationship. Esther, I mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. That was for a purpose, though.
Right.
A lot of this out here, you see it because it's just their pleasure, or they hate their own race.
Right.
You know, it's no purpose for it whatsoever.
Okay, so Esther, we're going to go to chapter 8 and verse 9. Okay, you know, if you're familiar with the story of Esther, this is why we commemorate the memorial of Purim. All right, this is where Purim comes from. This whole story of Hadassah, or, you know, Esther. Esther is her pagan name, but Hadassah is her Hebrew name. Okay, and we'll read. So this happened after, you know, there was a, you know, big drama between Esther and Mordecai and Haman, who Haman hated the Yahudim, but they were able to defeat Naaman and his scheme. So as a result, we'll see what happened. And Esther, or Hadassah Esther, is the queen over the region, and she was an Israelite. Okay. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is, the month Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Yahudim, and to the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the rulers of the provinces, which are from India unto Cush, or Ethiopia. And 127 provinces unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Yahudim according to the writing and according to their language. So we're going to see that this area that we're talking about, this land area, this empire, stretched from India unto Cush, or Ethiopia. So from India, which is, you know, east into Africa. And it says what? 127 provinces. So this is the area that we're talking about. And we're going to see what happened. And then jump down to verse 17. And in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Yahudim had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Yahudim, for the fear of the Yahudim fell upon them. So it's saying that many of the people of the land became followers. It says became Yahudim, but you know you can't become it's not a religion. But basically they became converted to the Torah. So this is from India into Africa. This province. That's why even today you find remnants of, you know, Indians, remnants of people in the Middle East, remnants of people in Africa that still follow the Torah. Okay? Not that they are Israelites, but they were converted. Okay? And again, there's nothing preventing them from converting. There's no one saying, hey, you can't do this. Alright, so we're going to jump over the same book. We're going to jump over to chapter 9. And I'm going to read verse 27. Esther 9:27. Okay. The Yahudim ordained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon all such as joined themselves unto them. So it's talking about others that joined unto them, right? Meaning the foreigners. So as it should not fail, that they should keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year. So this is talking about the days of Purim. Okay? So again, there was nothing preventing other people from joining themselves. The only requirement is that they submitted to Israel and they submitted to obeying the Torah.
How you spell it? Purim?
Yeah.
Purim, that's where we give gifts, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not Purim, but Purim.
Purim.
How's it pronounced?
Purim.
Purim.
The same one.
What you doing now, Mike?
That's the
Where you give gifts, yeah.
Yeah, that's the feast, not feast day. It's
Memorial.
memorial that we do gift giving, and that's in February.
It's falling March 1. This coming is falling March 1, 2018.
And like we said, he gonna do a lesson on all the memorials and feast days.
Yeah.
It's a nice basic.
Yeah, that'll be so helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the basics, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So again, if there's nothing preventing them, all they had to do was submit and obey. And the Christian church is telling us that JC came to die for these foreigners so that they could enter in. And then they have this whole doctrine of the engrafted branch and adoption and all this kind of stuff that makes no sense. It all falls apart. All you have to do is read the book.
Yeah. and the same with the Hebrew Israelites is saying the opposite, but like we were saying, what they try to do is break the meaning of stranger. Like, well, here means this, here.
All right. So, I mean, of course, when you look at Naaman, when you look at these various provinces, in Esther, it cannot be talking about Israelites that are converting back to being back to Torah. It doesn't make any sense. All right. These are clearly foreigners. All right. So we're going to go to the book of Daniel. We're going to see what happened during his days. And if we're familiar with the story of Daniel, we know that Daniel was in exile and went to Babylon, and he rose to prominence in Babylon because of his wisdom and his faithfulness to Yahuwah. All right, so we're going to go to chapter 3 and go to verse 29. Okay. So this is the story of the 3 Hebrew boys, one of the most famous stories in the Bible. Okay.
A bad Negro.
Yeah. Shadrach, Meshach, and a bad Negro. Yeah. Obviously, But, and this is talking about, we all, if you're not familiar with the story, these 3 Hebrew boys have also raised to prominence in Babylon in the political scheme, just like Daniel. But there was a time where they refused to worship this idol. And because they refused to worship the idol, they were thrown into a fiery furnace. However, Yahuwah delivered them, and the king, Nebuchadnezzar, saw this, and of course everyone else saw this as well. All right, so this is the decree that Nebuchadnezzar makes after Yahuwah delivers these 3 Hebrews from the fiery furnace. Okay, We'll start in verse 28. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the Elohim of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel or his messenger and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their Elohim. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the Elohim of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and the houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other Elohim that can deliver after this sort. Okay, so this is the king of Babylon, the king of Babylon. So Babylon is an empire ruling over many nations, right, at this time, right? So if the king made this decree, don't you think many people in his empire converted to following the Torah? Okay? So, again, and even Nebuchadnezzar is acknowledging Yahuwah is the mighty Elohim, the Elohim above all Elohim. Okay? And there's nothing preventing him from doing so. All right. So again, we're going to go to chapter 4. And we're going to go to verse 34. And again, this is why you go throughout the so-called Middle East and India and even into China, and you find people that have been following Torah for thousands of years. And they want to say that those are the so-called lost tribes of Israel. No, they're not lost tribes of Israel. They're the descendants of those converts. Okay. All right, so this is chapter 4 again. If you want to get the whole background of the story, you can read chapter 4. But basically, it's still talking about King Nebuchadnezzar. Because of his pride, Yahuwah made him lose his mind. So for several years, he was just out in the wilderness, just like a wild animal. And then he looked up to heaven and acknowledged that Yahuwah is actually the one that gave him his kingship, and his right mind returned to him. So after this experience, this is what Nebuchadnezzar confessed. So we're going to read Daniel chapter 4, verse 34. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes unto heaven, and my understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High. So he blessed Yahuwah, the king of Babylon. All right? And I praised and honored him that lives forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. So this is the king of Babylon acknowledging this. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing, and he does according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand, or say unto him, What do you? Alright, so again, he is worshiping Yahuwah, the king of Babylon. And there's nothing preventing him from doing so. Alright. Alright, so let's go over, still in Daniel, we're going to go over to chapter 6, and go down to verse 25. Daniel 6. Okay. Alright, so this is the king after Nebuchadnezzar, King Darius of the Persians. And again, this is Daniel still having a place of prominence, and
that's after he had killed Nebuchadnezzar's son, right?
Well, this is after the famous story of the lion's den.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you're not familiar with that story, Daniel again, under a king of a different empire, the Persian Empire, still has his place of prominence, and he had enemies that were conspiring against him, saying that no one should pray to anyone except to the king. But again, Daniel continued his prayer. He prayed towards Jerusalem 3 times a day, which is our custom as Israelites, to pray towards Jerusalem, and there are 3 prayer times a day. So if you don't know about that, hopefully we'll touch on that, in future lessons. Okay, but as a result of that, he was thrown into a lion's den, and Yahuwah protected him while he was in the lion's den, and of course Darius is now, proclaiming what has happened. So starting in verse 25, then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwelt in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the Elohim of Daniel, for he is the living Elohim, and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. Okay, again, this is the king of an empire, and he's writing this decree to all his provinces, saying that the Elohim of Daniel is the living Elohim. So don't you think many people of various nationalities would have converted to following this living Elohim? Okay.
Girls.
Okay, verse 26. He delivered and rescued, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. Okay, so basically giving a testimony to the supremacy of Yahuwah, and this is the king doing this. Okay, so imagine, however improbable that it may be, that Donald Trump goes before the world on national TV proclaiming that there's no God but Yahuwah, the God of the Negroes who are the Israelites. And imagine how much impact that would be.
I think all the Negroes are switched in. He said.
Okay.
What could turn his heart?
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
But again, there's so many. It almost gets boring after a while because
I remember you did this lesson with me, and I said that was one thing I was straight on. Just like you said, you went front whole.
There's so many references.
And then it's peculiar how it's on purpose that he takes the leader and converts them so that the people fall under.
You automatically know
Exactly.
people had at least like half or something.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go to the book of Jonah. Go to chapter 1. Okay. Again, Jonah is another popular Bible story. Jonah and the whale, and Jonah and the big fish. Okay.
And what's his name in the Hebrew?
Jonah.
Yuna.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. But Yahuwah sent a great wind into the sea, and there was a mighty tempest in the sea, so that the ship was like to be broken. And then the mariners were afraid, and cried every man unto his God, and cast forth the wares that were in the ship into the sea, to lighten it of them. But Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship, and he lay and was fast asleep. Okay, so we see what's happening, right? The storm's coming up, they're afraid of dying, and every man's crying out to their own God. Right? So, So what happens afterwards, right? So we're going to jump down to verse 13. All right. And he said unto them, and this is Jonah speaking, take me up and cast me forth into the sea, so shall the sea be calm unto you. For I know that for my sake this great tempest is upon you. So Jonah's like, you want to live? Throw me over. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring it to the land, but they could not, for the sea wrought, and was a tempestuous against them. Therefore they cried unto Yahuwah, and said, we beseech thee, we beseech you, Yahuwah, we beseech you, let us not perish for this man's life. Lay not upon us innocent blood, for you, Yahuwah, has done as it pleased you. Okay? So again, what happened? First they were crying out to their own gods, and now they're crying out to Yahuwah. So they took up Jonah and cast him forth into the sea, and the sea ceased from her raging. Then the men feared Yahuwah exceedingly, and offered a sacrifice unto Yahuwah, and made vows. So these men sacrificed to Yahuwah and made vows to him. There was no JC. Right? Nothing preventing them from doing so. This is, it's a clear-cut conversion, experience.
Just to play their side, but they could also, they be like, okay, like you saying, nothing stopped them from joining, so they joined, but then they'll say he came and died because, our sins were too outrageous, and he had to stop us from sinning. So that's when, that's what someone still say.
Well, yeah, we'll get into that. That's a whole different lesson. All right. So again, we started with the Torah about the stranger. We went to Solomon's dedication at the temple. We saw that Yahuwah protects the alien, and he actually commands Israel to protect the foreigners that are among us. We looked at Naaman. We looked at what happened under Queen Esther. We looked at what happened in the book of Daniel. We see what happened in the book of Jonah. Okay. So when we get to the New Testament, what is this whole deal about Jews and Gentiles? What's the issue? Because we see throughout the Old Testament, throughout the Tanakh, that there's no problem. The only thing that the foreigners had to do was to submit and follow the Torah. Okay, so that's something that we'll have to get to, I guess, maybe in a future lesson.
Yeah, maybe. Let me get it. Yeah, maybe next week, because I already got kind of the lesson I'm gonna do. But yeah, that might. Excuse me. Yeah, I definitely say continue that. Mm-hmm. And then maybe the week after, we could do that lesson Makisha requested about the feast days. But do you want to give them a little? Just let them know basically what it is
for the New Testament.
Yeah.
Well, basically, the understanding is that when we're talking about, when we have to understand their language and their terminology, mm-hmm. and when they were talking about Gentiles, the generally speaking, they were talking about Israelites of the Northern Kingdom, mm-hmm. who had lost their name because they had been
given a bill
divorced.
of divorce. Yep.
Right.
And the only way, he had to die in order for them to be, married back in.
Right. So when Paul talks about the ordinance that was nailed to the cross, that ordinance that was nailed to the cross was the bill of divorce. But if you don't understand the Torah and it talks about, you know, divorce, a man has to give the woman a bill of divorce and all these kind of things, you just don't understand when you get to the New Testament.
Mm.
So that, you know, basically, you know, is it in a nutshell, is that the word Gentile in the New Testament most usually is talking about Israelites of the Northern Kingdom.
And once you had,
like I was saying, so that since they can say, oh, our sin was so bad that he had come, but like you said, he had no covenant with the other nations, so their sin wouldn't be so bad because he
ain't had no covenant with them. Yeah,
that's what it says. Without the Torah, there is no sin.
And that's the thing. Once with that understanding in mind, once you read. Then when you read Galatians and Paul's writings, it takes on a whole new, simple light, you know. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, that wraps up another Shabbat. Tune in for the next one. What I'm going to be doing is after this video finished processing, I'm going to just cut it into 2 videos. So you could view Adonai's teaching. You don't have to watch all the way through mine. But anyway, Shabbat Shalom. Everybody have a nice day.